most of us carry a harmful belief, one that quietly steals our peace and pushes so many relationships into dead ends. We assume that caring about someone means thinking about them non-stop. We assume love, attachment, or even the way we work through a wound requires keeping their image constantly in mind. Deep down, you tell yourself that if you analyze enough, understand them enough, you'll be able to control this relationship or finally find peace. But Carl Jung, one of the greatest analysts in history, uncovered a hard truth. When you let someone take up too much space in your head, whether it's the person you're madly in love with, a family member, or the one who left scars on your heart, you're not truly connecting with them at all. That relentless fixation, those imagined conversations on repeat, all of it becomes a trap. While you chase the illusion of another person, you lose yourself, and without realizing it, you hand over your inner power. Today, we're going to take this exhausting psychological mechanism apart, piece by piece. Stay with me until the very end, because once you understand the deeper message Jung left behind, you'll be holding the one key to building the relationships you want and reclaiming real freedom for your soul. Number 1. The mind's sweet lie. Thinking about them helps me understand them. The first key to freedom lies in exposing the subtle, false belief you use to manipulate yourself. This lie comes wrapped in the language of care, responsibility, or even deep devotion. Night after night, it leans in and whispers, "The more I think about them, the more I'll understand them." Have you ever noticed how, once the outside world finally goes quiet, something inside you turns into a noisy work site of racing thoughts? You lie there, rereading a short text message over and over, picking apart a passing glance from the day before, or replaying an unfinished conversation that should have ended a long time ago. Your mind clings to their image, carefully molding every tiny detail into conclusions about them. What are they thinking? Why did they do that? Do they feel something for me? And yet, the human mind has blind spots that shape how you judge someone. A classic study by psychologist Edward Thorndike in 1920 proved this. In an evaluation of military officers, Thorndike asked them to rate their subordinates across several completely independent categories: physical ability, intelligence, leadership, and moral character. The results exposed a major crack in perception. If a soldier looked handsome or stood with a crisp, upright posture, the officer would automatically give him high scores for intelligence, bravery, and discipline, even when no real evidence supported those traits. From one faint brushstroke, the brain paints a flawless masterpiece. What those officers did in that experiment mirrors the quiet tragedy playing out in your inner world right now. Through the mechanism of projection, Jung believed we rarely interact with who another person truly is. Instead, without realizing it, we assign our own thoughts, emotions, desires, or personality traits onto them. Obsession creates a brutally cruel paradox. The more you think about someone, the more blind you become to reality. In ways you barely notice, your psyche takes long-held expectations, romantic ideals, constant insecurity, and even the longing you've never seen returned, then drapes all of it over the other person's shoulders. You turn them into the perfect coat rack for the scenes you keep writing and performing in your own mind. Just like a soldier only has to stand tall to get labeled brave, sometimes all it takes is a gentle, caring look from the other person for your mind to cast them as the most understanding life partner in the world. You cradle an illusion, torment yourself over a character you invented, and end up trapped inside a work of art shaped by your own mirage. As long as this curtain of projection blocks your view, every attempt to understand them will only turn into echoes that fall into empty space. At this point, A lot of people push back. But I have to think to find a solution. If I don't analyze every word, how will I know what to do next? This argument is incredibly subtle because it borrows the name of logic to justify an emotional addiction. The line between problem-solving and paralyzing rumination is worlds apart. Productive thinking always has a stopping point. It moves you from naming what's happening to making a decision, drawing a clear boundary that cuts through hesitation. Rumination, on the other hand, chewing the same cluster of thoughts again and again, becomes a closed, dark loop. It's like strapping yourself onto an emotional roller coaster, shooting up into hope, then dropping into disappointment, only to realize you've been circling the same starting line the whole time. Each of those loops, the ones that seem harmless as they drift through your mind, quietly activates your nervous system and forces your body to keep pumping out stress hormones. Your mind gets wrung out by thoughts that swing from positive to negative, and by emotions that flip from anger to hope to happiness, then back again. Ironically, none of it creates any real connection. The other person keeps living their calm, ordinary life, completely unaware of the earth-shaking battles tearing through your mind. You lock yourself in a narrow room, endlessly arguing with a shadow on the wall, and mistake it for a conversation with the outside world. And as long as you keep believing the sweet lie that thinking about them, analyzing them, proves love and helps me understand them, you'll keep spinning in circles. To find the way out, we have to pull down this curtain of illusion and go deeper, to the place where that brutal pull was truly born. Not because they're so extraordinary, but because your unconscious is crying out. Number 2. The deeper cause. Why can't you control your thoughts about this person? Once the halo you've been stitching together comes down, another question rises up, sharper and deeper. If I made all of this up in my own mind, why can't I stop? Why do I still let myself sink into this maze, even when my rational mind feels worn out from warning me? Carl Jung once left behind a statement with real weight, like a wake-up call for anyone longing to reclaim inner sovereignty. If you imagine someone who is brave enough to withdraw all his projections, then you get an individual who is conscious of a considerable shadow. This isn't just psychological information. It's a map for exhausted souls. It helps you see that the reason you can't stop thinking about someone often lives in layers your conscious mind has never touched. Cause number 1, the imprint of childhood. If we follow the root thread of this obsession, it leads back into the quiet, hidden corners of time, where childhood memories hold their breath and weight. In America, and in any modern society that prizes independence, we're often taught to be strong, to move on. But the part of you that lives beneath what you can consciously notice doesn't understand time. For many people, constantly turning attention outward to read someone else's mood became a survival strategy programmed in early. Some children grow up in a home where love never feels guaranteed, where it comes as a reward you have to earn. That child learns that safety requires becoming a tiny mind reader. They listen for the rhythm of a father's footsteps after work, study every crease in a mother's brow at the dinner table, and learn to adjust their own breathing to match the adult's moods. This hypervigilance helps the child avoid explosions of anger or win a small scrap of attention. Later, even when life changes, the brain keeps running the same old pattern. Your present-day pain, the obsession with a toxic family member, or an emotionally unavailable lover, really comes from the echo of a trembling inner child. That child still believes, if I don't understand them, they'll leave me. You're not too attached, and you're not weak. You're repeating a strategy that once kept you safe. But the cruel part is, now that you're an adult with agency, that armor has grown tight and heavy. It no longer protects you. It squeezes your breath instead, wearing you down inside endless, no-exit interpretations. Still, if we stop at childhood imprinting, we haven't fully decoded the compulsive force of these thoughts. Cause number 2, avoiding what's within. Go deeper into the shadowed basement of the psyche, and the second cause cuts sharper, with a more directly therapeutic meaning. Jung suggested that at the core of every addiction, whether to a substance or to the emotional pull of another person, lives a spiritual search aimed at the wrong place. When your soul loses connection with the self, you start to feel like a wandering fragment. Instead of turning inward to recover wholeness, the ego takes a shortcut. It spots something divine in another person, salvation, rescue, or a powerful sense of belonging. You're not addicted to them. You're addicted to the feeling of being filled that they seem to bring. When this spiritual search collapses, obsession turns into a shield. Thinking about them 24/7, whether it hurts or feels good, keeps your mind busy. Why? Because if you stop thinking about them, you'll have to face the terrifying silence of the void inside you. That's where primal fears live, along with emptiness, meaninglessness, and wounds that never fully healed. On some unconscious level, you'd rather choose the suffering of a named obsession than face an unnamed nothingness. These two causes feed each other in a loop. You search for wholeness in someone else, and when you realize they can't truly fill you, you cling to their image so you don't have to fall into your own depths. To picture this confusion more clearly, remember the biblical story of the golden calf. When the great guide Moses disappeared on Mount Sinai, the people at the foot of the mountain panicked. They couldn't bear the absence of a spiritual anchor. In that panic, they gathered their gold and melted it down into a calf-shaped idol, then knelt before it. The person you've placed on a mental pedestal right now has become a golden calf of your own. When you lose contact with your true self, the most trustworthy inner guide, you feel utterly disoriented. And then, without realizing it, you cast a false idol out of projected images. You orbit them, worship their presence inside your head, and believe their approval or understanding will save you. But no idol out there can fill the emptiness within you. You're caught in a battle between the false safety of habit and the soul's call toward freedom. Don't rush to attack those obsessive thoughts with harshness. They're trying to tell you something about the hidden parts you've neglected for a long time. They're fragments of the past and gaps in the present, asking to be seen and healed. Still, this pull has one more layer, one last subtle trap Jung described as the awakening of ancient archetypes. In those moments, you don't just obsess over someone's personality, you get swept into a mythic force, where you believe you've found the missing other half of your soul. Cause number 3, the awakening of Anima and Animus. In every man's inner world, a deeply hidden feminine soul lives within him, called the Anima. And deep inside every woman, a powerful masculine spirit lives, called the Animus. These hidden inner selves form the missing pieces, holding all the traits and longings you've suppressed or never dared to live out fully. As you move through life, you may run into someone whose personality, gaze, or presence matches the sleeping archetype inside you with uncanny precision. An invisible button gets pressed. Your entire psychic system lights up. You feel pulled toward them the way iron flies to a magnet. Modern culture often calls this intensity destiny or love at first sight. In truth, the other person has stepped into the role of a mirror. What you love with that frantic intensity isn't them. You're falling in love with your own beauty, your own strength, or your own freedom. Without meaning to, you hand them the key to your emotional door, and just like that, they start to rule your mind. Here's the painful paradox so many people in modern situationships keep running into. We often obsess the hardest over the people we've spent the least time with. Why can someone you've only met a few times take up more space in your mind than the people who've been beside you for years? The answer lives in the gap. When you don't know much about who they truly are, your unconscious gets a wide, open, empty field where it can project an image of perfection. The ambiguity, the lack of information, becomes the catalyst. You start stitching together an ideal storyline where they have no flaws, no bad habits, nothing rough around the edges, only bright, shining hope. This kind of pain echoes the Greek myth of Pygmalion, the sculptor who poured his whole soul into carving a woman so perfect that he fell in love with the lifeless statue itself. In these in-between relationships, you become Pygmalion. You're loving a statue you've shaped in your own mind, loving the potential you painted onto them, not the limited, imperfect human standing in front of you. This obsession turns into an inner monologue disguised as love. You exhaust yourself tending to the image in your head, while the real world between you stays unbuilt, without a single brick laid down. Seeing this doesn't exist to make you despair. It exists to wake you up. The strength and wholeness you've been trying to find in them has been inside you all along. Number 3. The consequences: stolen psychic energy and the state of living by proxy. When you keep carving that Pygmalion statue in your mind, falling for a potential that was never real, you forget something essential. Every strike of the chisel, every hour you spend feeding that illusion, gets paid for with your own life force. The pain of obsession doesn't end at disappointment. It slowly corrodes you from the inside. Because when someone lives in your head for too long, they don't stay there like a guest. They start spending the most precious resource you have. Jung saw psychic energy, the life current that drives you to create, to love, to build your life, as limited. Picture it like water flowing through your garden. When you direct that water toward the trees you care for, toward your work, toward inner peace, your garden turns lush. But when your mind sets up camp around someone else's image, you divert that entire flow beyond your own borders. Do you feel that sharp kind of exhaustion after hours of scrolling through their profile? You hunt for every tiny trace, from a new photo to a throwaway status update, hoping to find even one hint that you matter in their life. That's where large-scale energy loss begins. When your libido gets jammed in someone out there, your own life starts to dry out and wither. And this drain leads to a psychological state Jung called participation mystique. The term originally described how ancient tribes felt one with nature, with no clear boundary between self and world. But inside modern relationships, it becomes a brutal trap. You begin living a proxy life. Your happiness or pain no longer comes from your own ground. It depends entirely on a look, a reply, or the other person's silence. You probably know this feeling by heart. A single message notification lights up your whole world, then a few hours of silence can drag you into a pit of dread. The line between you and them fades out. You become a satellite spinning around a foreign planet, losing your own axis. This is loss of self, a price far too high to pay just to keep a fragile thread of connection alive. Modern science has offered sharp evidence for why the loop of thinking about someone feels so hard to break. The brain has a built-in pull toward unfinished business, unanswered questions, loose ends. It clings more intensely to what stays incomplete than to what feels clear and resolved. A situationship, a breakup with no explanation, or a sudden act of ghosting becomes the ultimate, unfinished event for your nervous system. Your brain keeps sending signals that push you to find an answer, because it believes rest can only come once the mystery gets solved. And this chase for clarity ends up locking you inside an endless obsession. This torture becomes even more addictive under the influence of dopamine, the hormone we often link with happiness. In his research, Dr. Robert Sapolsky has pointed out that the brain releases the biggest dopamine surge not when we receive a reward, but in the moment of uncertainty, especially while waiting, especially while anticipating. That's why a random text from someone who usually stays silent can make you burst with joy. The ambiguity, the on and off, the hot and cold pattern becomes the cruelest way to hack straight into your nervous system. You don't miss the person. You're hooked on anticipation, hooked on the moment that whispers, maybe this time they'll be different. This is chemical manipulation at its cruelest, tricking you into believing you're deeply in love when you're simply an addict, craving the next dopamine hit of uncertainty. The critical takeaway is the sobering realization that we often confuse the drama of brain chemistry with destiny. Reclaiming your psychic energy has never been selfish. It's a responsibility you owe your own life. To do that, you need to draw a clear line between a heart that knows how to love and a mind that's been taken hostage. The next part of the journey won't be about changing them. It will be about calling back the pieces of your soul you dropped along the road while chasing an illusion. Number 4. The difference between real love and dependence. We grow up in a culture raised on tear-soaked love songs and movie scripts that glorify self-forgetting sacrifice. Obsession gets romanticized to an extreme. If you can't sleep, if your chest tightens every time they run late, if you're willing to throw away every personal boundary just to stay in rhythm with their happiness, society nods approvingly and calls it loving with your whole life. That mindset trains you to hypnotize yourself, to measure the depth of a relationship by how much you suffer. In truth, you're clinging to the only life raft you can find in an ocean of craving for connection. With his ability to see through every polished disguise, Carl Jung exposed this painful illusion. Through a depth psychology lens, those desperate cravings and the non-stop mental possession contain no love at all. They carry the shape of an unconscious demand. When a relationship gets built on inner lack, the other person quietly turns into a patch meant to cover the holes in your soul. The frightened child inside you grips the hem of a stranger's shirt, screaming for them to soothe your anxiety, fill your loneliness, and take responsibility for your sense of safety. When you place the full weight of your emotions onto the shoulders of a living, breathing human being, you take away their freedom. An ordinary person, full of flaws, can never carry the role of a perfect savior. The relationship becomes an invisible prison. They start to suffocate under your massive expectations, while you live in constant nervous suspense, terrified that one day the medicine will stop working, or they'll leave. Against the abyss of dependence, Jung opens a new horizon for real love, a love that can only sprout from the ground of wholeness. Wholeness here never means spotless perfection. It's the moment you dare to walk through the dark, face your own scars, and choose to reclaim every projection you once threw onto someone else. You agree to clear the wreckage in your own mind with your own hands, instead of waiting for someone to come and clean it up for you. Mature love is a meeting of two whole beings with clear boundaries, like two solid pillars holding up the same temple roof. Two people step into each other's lives from a place of fullness, because they want to share the richness within them, not from the posture of a beggar pleading for attention. You love them with all their clumsy habits, with the most ordinary hidden corners of real life, instead of worshipping them as an ideal meant to rescue you. To feel the brightness of the transformation from dependent attachment into unconditional love, look at the path of Elizabeth Gilbert, author of the best-selling memoir, Eat, Pray, Love. For years, Elizabeth admitted she was like a love-starved golden retriever, constantly jumping from one relationship to the next, dissolving her identity into the men she met. She lived inside their minds, changing her preferences, her voice, even her dreams, just to make sure they wouldn't leave. In return, her own mind stayed obsessed, spinning in jealousy, control, and a crushing fear of being alone. The breaking point came one night when she collapsed crying on the bathroom floor, drained, hopeless, praying through an unhappy marriage and the loss of herself. She realized she had tried to become the perfect wife, the perfect woman, shaped by other people's expectations until she no longer knew who she was. But this time, Elizabeth made a ruthless decision against her old pattern. She stepped into the year-long journey of solitude across Italy, India, and Bali. She faced the terrifying silence of her own mind, practiced meditation in the middle of panic, and slowly gathered up the scattered pieces of her soul. She pulled her projections back in, learned how to soothe her inner child, and rebuilt the boundaries of an independent self. Only when Elizabeth felt completely at ease with solitude, when she stood steady at her own center and touched wholeness, did real love find her. This time, she didn't rush toward another person like a moth chasing flame. She didn't need a partner to fill anything, because her cup had already filled itself. This new connection carried a quiet, safe, completely free atmosphere, a love with no shadow of manipulation or obsessive torment. The biggest difference between dependence and pure love lives in the breath of the soul. Dependence makes you breathe fast, always reaching outward to hold on. Real love lets you breathe deep, step back, and take in the other person's beauty, while both of you remain fully free. When you stop using them as shelter, you finally gain the capacity to give love. A transformation like Elizabeth Gilbert's, moving from lack into wholeness, doesn't happen by random miracle. It calls for very specific practices, the kind that cut the umbilical cord of unconscious attachment. How do you stop your mind from wandering into their world? How do you turn these deeper ideas into action in the ordinary breath-by-breath rhythm of daily life? In the final stretch of this journey, we'll light that path together. Number 5. Practice. Reclaiming psychic energy and the call of individuation. The transformation from the darkness of lack into the light of wholeness never arrives like a miracle after one sleepless night. It grows out of small, quiet, deeply courageous choices made in the everyday rhythm of your breath. You'll need to step into a clear practice path, moving through 3 checkpoints of the soul. Step 1. Gentle awareness and the art of reclaiming energy. Every psychological escape begins with a moment of awareness. In the early days of trying to break the habit of circling around their image, you'll notice your mind acts like a wild horse, trained to run the same old track. You're washing dishes, driving, or turning a page in a book, and suddenly the thought of their smile, the unanswered message, or a hazy future scene rushes in on its own. The pull feels so strong, your body reacts right away. Your hand reaches for your phone without thinking. Pain at this stage often comes with harsh self-judgment. You scold yourself for being weak, burn with frustration over why you keep falling into the same hole you promised yourself you'd avoid. But that inner attack only pours fuel on the fire of exhaustion. The key to this practice is absolute compassion toward yourself. Don't judge. Don't fight with inner violence. When you catch your mind wandering into someone else's territory, treat it the way you'd guide a lost child home. Simply name it, gently. Oh, my energy is flowing outward again. Then, as slowly as you can, anchor your attention back into physical reality. Feel the coolness of the water sliding between your fingers if you're washing dishes. Listen to the low hum of tires grinding against the road if you're driving. Take one deep breath and fully notice your lungs expanding and releasing. Physical reality becomes the strongest anchor for pulling your soul out of the storm of thought. Each time you notice and redirect, No matter if it lasts only a few seconds, you remove one more brick from the wall of projection, bringing each precious drop of life energy back home to nourish you. Step 2. Daring to sit with the sacred void. Once you get better at pulling your mind away from them, a powerful psychological wave shows up almost immediately. It feels sharp, overwhelming, and deeply challenging. When the noise about the other person finally goes quiet, what waits behind the curtain is the same haunting silence we've been naming all along. This feeling can get so unbearable that your survival instincts kick in, and you'll crave something, anything, to numb the pain. Your fingers itch to scroll social media, to send a pointless text, to blast loud music, or to drag someone out for drinks, just to kill the stillness. This becomes the moment that decides your freedom. Instead of reaching outward to escape, the practice asks you to stay right in the center of the storm. Sit there, in your chair, in the dark room. Let loneliness move through every cell. Let the bitter tears fall without needing anyone to wipe them away. Let the anger burn in your chest until it burns itself out. In the soul's inner alchemy, this emptiness becomes the darkest, most fertile ground for what matters to return. A seed has to endure the crushing pressure and cold of the earth before it can lift its first leaves toward the sun. After hours of meeting pain with bare feet, you may feel stunned by a freeing truth. Loneliness doesn't kill you. Emptiness doesn't swallow you whole. You have the strength to hold yourself through the longest, darkest nights without clinging to anyone. Step 3. The call of individuation and a radiant rising. After you pass through the cleansing fire of the void, you step into the highest stage of psychological growth, the process of individuation. This is the final destination Carl Jung devoted his life to guiding humanity toward. Many people assume that stopping your obsession with someone will turn you cold, numb, and walled off from the world. The truth runs in the opposite direction. Individuation leads you toward wholeness and depth, toward knowing exactly who you are when you stand alone under the open sky. Practicing this process means changing the entire system of questions running through your mind. Instead of waking up and asking, "What are they thinking about me today?" or "What do I need to do to get their attention?" you gently turn that empathic radar inward. You begin asking the questions that build a life. Right now, what does my soul long for? What is my body trying to tell me through this ache and fatigue? Which passion have I left untouched for far too long? You move from the posture of an emotional beggar into the stance of a king, governing the rich inner kingdom of your own life. When your libido stops leaking outward, it starts flowing back home, carrying a fierce vitality that helps you rebuild your career, sharpen gifts that have been asleep, and tend to small, honest joys. You become radiant, steady, and deeply magnetic, not because you're trying to perform perfection, but because you're living in tune with the pulse of your true self. And the sweetest reward of this journey is a completely new definition of connection. When you can stand firmly at your own center, your inner cup fills on its own. From there, you enter a relationship simply because you value their presence, the way you value a beautiful sunset. You love from the quiet of a soul that's already full. You can love someone deeply without dissolving your identity into them. You can understand them without torturing yourself with endless guessing. And strangely, beautifully, once you stop gripping them with the suffocating expectations of dependence, the relationship begins to bloom on its own, in an atmosphere of freedom, truth, and something sacred. Reclaiming your psychic energy becomes the greatest act of love, not only toward yourself, but toward the people lucky enough to step into your life. Number 6. One final, important warning. Right at the most luminous milestone of this individuation process, A quiet earthquake will start rippling into your outer world, and you need to brace yourself for it. A new way of living, rooted in wholeness, no longer clinging, no longer begging for approval, will almost certainly shock the relationship ecosystem around you. Reality has a way of revealing this. For a long time, many pieces of your world stayed peaceful because you kept conceding, because you wore yourself down to keep other people comfortable. The moment you pull that serving energy back, the moment you refuse to keep trimming your soul to fit the mold of outside expectations, everything around you begins to shake, especially the people who grew used to your surrender, those who, by accident or by intention, lived off your dependence and your unlimited tolerance, will feel their sense of safety seriously threatened. They may respond to your independence with sharpness. Through gossip or direct criticism, they'll quickly pin cruel labels on you. Selfish, cold, distant. They might even sigh with disappointment and announce that you've changed, and not for the better. Sometimes the weight of those judgments feels heavy enough to knock you off balance, to make the child inside you want to give up and hide again behind the familiar shadow of obedience. But the most important warning I want to leave you with is this: never doubt your steps. Open your arms and bravely welcome the collapse of a few old relationships. Those cracks aren't a tragedy. They're a sacred, inevitable, natural selection of the psyche. Through a depth psychology lens, the people who turn their backs the moment you stop sacrificing never truly met or understood who you are. What they loved and what they miss was the obedient social mask, the exhausting role you forced yourself to play just to buy a small sense of safety. Their leaving becomes a profound cleansing. The storm washes away rotten branches, clears your entire living space, and returns clean air and real freedom. And right there, in that empty space, clean, proud, and open, a new door swings wide. It makes room for kindred souls, for people with enough depth and strength to step in, connect, and honor your true self, someone radiant, original, and no longer bowing to any illusion ever again. So we've walked through the maze of projection together, faced the dark void, and found the way out into wholeness. Looking back on the whole journey, let one truth sink in. No one gets to camp out in your mind for free, unless you hand them the key yourself. When someone's image takes over your thoughts for too long, your unconscious rings a sharp alarm, urgently calling you back home. It signals that you've been gone too long, that it's time to stop wandering outside yourself just to decode or please a world that feels unfamiliar. Now comes the moment to pull your projections back, put out the exhausting emotional addiction, and bravely hold both the radiant parts and the darkest corners within you. The greatest freedom in a human life doesn't come from controlling what other people think about you. It comes the morning you stretch awake, take one deep breath that fills your chest, and the first bright thought in your mind is your own beautiful life, the one you're building with your own hands. You've been whole and complete all along, starting right now. Call your energy back home. If today's journey touched a piece inside you that's been asking for comfort, be brave and leave your story and your feelings in the comments. Your honest sharing might become a guiding light for someone out there who's feeling lost. And finally, please hit like, share this video with anyone who needs it, and don't forget to subscribe so we can keep holding hands through healing journeys, rising into wholeness together in the videos to come.